Well, thank you very much, Wendy, for that lovely introduction. I'm blushing a little bit now. But I'd like to thank Wendy, actually. Plymouth's engagement with this process, engagement with what we're doing, and enthusiasm for this event has been absolutely essential for us to put it on. And I'm very grateful to Plymouth. And I'm really grateful for all of you to come here today. We've got an incredible audience, a really diverse group from more than 30 countries. So it's really a wonderful opportunity, I think, to create lasting networks. So everybody knows the world's best universities are old, yeah? There's been a long, enduring sense that tradition and history and heritage goes hand in hand with excellence. There's been a disparaging side to people talking about the new universities if they're somehow not as good. It's been an extraordinary situation that we've faced. And there is no doubt the old universities do have tremendous advantages. As Wendy's pointed out, they're part of the fabric of major cities. They're often custodians of national treasures. They've got centuries of building alumni networks. They've got property portfolios that are worth millions and millions of pounds. They've got incredible advantages, the reputational elements of being part of the fabric of a city. And they do top the traditional league tables. So when I came up with the idea of the 100 under 50 rankings back in 2011, there was a sort of nagging sense that maybe it was a sort of the result of special pleading, that the young universities needed their own pool to swim in so they didn't get eaten by these big sharks, these big rich sharks with their hundreds and hundreds of years of experience. It was hard to shake the feeling that there was a little bit of a sense of special pleading, but it feels very different today. Just 3 years on, we're about to publish the 3rd edition. And there's a really strong sense of optimism and dynamism that we're detecting. The leaders of the new generation of institutions featured in the 100 under 50 are bullish. As we've heard from Wendy, they're happy to compete alongside the old guard. They're confident of their ability to thrive in a dynamic and diverse higher education sector. And actually, we've seen this sense that they see their youth as a distinct advantage, not a hindrance, in a marketplace that requires agility, flexibility, risk-taking, innovation. They may actually have a critical edge against some of the old universities. So I think this ranking has become really a very exciting celebration of the young universities. So we're publishing it on Wednesday afternoon. I'm sworn to secrecy. There's a worldwide embargo. I have to respect that, but I will try and give you some good hints and some tips about the way it's developing and provide a few case studies. But I think what's most exciting to me is that we have a whole day of exciting case studies. Some of the most exciting universities in the world are here today to share experience, not just among the speakers, but also in the audience. So it's a fantastic opportunity. So first of all, just introduce myself. Wendy did it perfectly well. I like to use this slide because it mentions this top 15 ranking. I myself am subjected to rankings by newspapers. God, that's horrible, isn't it, having been ranked? But I do like to show off about that. But the point about that ranking from the Australian, this influential thing, it was about the rankings. It wasn't anything to do with me. The rankings have become powerful globally. They're a real force. And I really like to use this slide as well because it says I'm a franker ranker. It's incidentally was drawn at an OECD event. I know I don't quite look like that. My suntan's not quite as good as that one. But there's a really important sense that we have at Times Higher Education that rankings have to be transparent. We have to be accountable. We need to be honest about their shortcomings, honest about their limitations. And I think that means recognizing there is not one single model of excellence. Universities should and can be judged against their missions. And the traditional rankings look at world-class research institutions, but we are keen to develop new metrics to reflect new diversification of missions. And we want to shine a light on different aspects of performance. So I'm sure you all know us best for the World University Rankings. They have become an extraordinary phenomenon. Last year we had about 50 million page views across the year. This year we're already at 30 million, so we're massively exceeding that. We've sold, the free iPhone app has been downloaded 50,000 times. They've become a huge phenomenon. They drive student behavior. They become an important student consumer tool. helping students and their parents make decisions, pick the right universities and make the right choices. But increasingly, we've seen them becoming a kind of geopolitical indicator. More and more, they're being used by governments and by university leaders as a strategic tool. And Times Higher Education wants to help the sector itself strategically. We don't just want to provide a service to students. And actually, we feel our rankings say a lot more than the other rankings about the size and shape and trajectory of the global higher education sector. And that's why we've seen the rankings making business news headlines around the world. They speak of the knowledge economy. They tell us about institutions' progress in pushing the boundaries of knowledge and driving local economies, and that's a really important aspect. And that's why we've seen them being integrated into government policy. David Willits, the UK Universities Minister, said he accepts the criteria we use. It's very much in line with UK government policy. But right through to India and the developing world, Sashi Tharoor, the Minister of State, said the Times Higher Education rankings are the principal yardstick that India should look to. But there's something that I have to be honest about, just between us in this very intimate environment. I'm sure the tweets and things don't affect the intimacy of this environment. I have to confess, the traditional world university rankings are pretty boring. There's something very predictable about them. This is the top 5. It's always about the US. The US takes 4 of the top 5 positions, 7 of the world's top 10. It takes an absolutely staggering 76 of the top 200 places. And if you look at the distribution of universities around the world in the traditional rankings, you can see they're overwhelmingly concentrated in North America and Western Europe and the developed world. But there is also something else stubbornly predictable about the rankings. All the top universities do have something in common. They are all old. The average age of the top 200 is actually around 200 years old. Our number 1 institution, which is at the cutting edge, is actually California Institute of Technology. It's founded in 1891. It's 123. Oxford, as Wendy says, has got about 900 years of history. Berkeley was founded in 1869. If you look across the regions, all the leading institutions in the regions are old. Sao Paulo is a mere slip of a thing at 80, but otherwise we're seeing a predictable aspect of the rankings. And Clark Kerr, the founding president of California Berkeley, said in 1982, about 85 institutions in the Western world established by 1520 still exist in recognizable forms with similar functions and with unbroken histories, including the Catholic Church, the Parliament of Great Britain, and 70 universities. Kings that rule, feudal lords with vassals, and guilds with monopolies are all gone. These 70 universities, however, are still in the same locations, with the same buildings, with professors and students doing much the same things, and with governance carried on in much the same way. Some people say, well, that's a really positive thing, but actually that sounds quite extraordinary, doesn't it? Of course, knowledge is enduring and endless, and the quest for knowledge is a long process, but actually, age and tradition aren't a prerequisite of excellence. And like I said, it can often be an actual hindrance. So we're going to hear from Jamil Salmi after me, but I can't resist quoting him. He's talked about in his leadership on the idea of building and developing world-class universities that achieving world-class status has historically been a long and complex process. I love this wine analogy. They have a long maturation period. And, there is that aspect, but I think, as Jamil has also pointed out, things are really changing. The decision of middle and high-income countries to step up investment in support of their elite universities and the excellence initiatives has led to a real sense that you can achieve a lot in a short space of time. And we've seen it in Hong Kong, and we've seen it in Korea, and we're seeing it across the world. And even where governments aren't plowing money into creating new universities, into excellence initiatives, we're seeing institutions themselves seizing the initiative and rising to take the initiative, places like Plymouth and places like York. So we felt we really wanted to actually highlight these achievements, highlight these institutions, draw attention to their trajectories. So we came up with the 100 under 50 rankings. Andrew Oswald, professor of economics at Warwick, was somebody I consulted before we produced the first ranking in 2012. He's a friendly critic, a real critic of rankings, but a critical friend at the same time. And he really gave me a ring of confidence. They give us a glimpse of the likely future Harvards and Berkeleys. Most empires eventually crumble, especially those that think it could never happen to them. And once upon a time, both Harvard and Berkeley were derided as Nowhereville. The data give us a sense of perspective. And as Julian Beer from Plymouth University said, they're sort of acting like a kind of alternative investment market. The precocious elite. How many of you here today feel that you're part of the precocious elite? That's a good badge. I like that description. Julian, obviously. And a sneaky preview, we have Sir Patrick Stewart speaking at the launch of the rankings at Going Global on Wednesday. Patrick, obviously, you'll know as Charles Xavier from the X-Men or Jean-Luc Picard from the Starship Enterprise, but I know him as a wonderfully engaged and passionate advocate of Huddersfield University as Huddersfield's Chancellor. Huddersfield is our University of the Year, partly because of its innovative approach. And Sir Patrick Stewart, I'm keen on democracy in all its forms, and the 100 under 50 concept strikes me as a democratic one. It says that what matters about a university are the quality and the ambition of its research and graduate employability, not how much ivy is growing on the walls. So we're really excited to be putting together the 150 rankings. We think it's a really important addition to the rankings pool. And I think what's excited me about it is that, as I said at the beginning, it's moved from being something of a kind of bit of special pleading, and I was lobbied. The Australian Technology Network were very vociferous in saying, the effective age is something you really must take into account when you look at these rankings. The accumulation of citations takes time, accumulation of reputation. But I think the thing that really got me, that when I was producing the supplement, which we'll be distributing to all of you electronically once it's live on Wednesday and we'll be giving out at the Going Global, is that the people I spoke to were really optimistic and really bullish. Like I say, they feel they've got a real advantage, not a disadvantage. The marketplace is so rapidly changing. It requires innovation, flexibility, agility, and risk-taking, and bravery. And actually, a lot of institutions on the younger end of the spectrum are more able to do that. So it's showcased by the comments. Anthony Foster from Essex, he felt that Essex is unhampered by the burdens of tradition and history, focusing on the future. Wei Q, the president of City University Hong Kong, made a very similar point. We're unencumbered by outdated modes of operation, free from being trapped by the burdens of tradition. But my favorite was obviously Wendy, and I'm sure we'll hear this a few times today, the new slogan, you don't need to be old, you just need to be bold, which I loved. So the results are out on Wednesday, 4 p.m. here in the US, www.thewur.com for short. But as we're among friends, I think I will give you some previews and pointers. So a reminder, the methodology, we have 13 separate performance indicators. The most comprehensive ranking around. We do capture the teaching environment, research. We do look at the reputation of institutions. We look at knowledge transfer. The knowledge transfer aspect of the ranking is the least satisfactory from my perspective, and I'm really excited that later today we have a panel dedicated to developing new rankings metrics, new ways of capturing innovation, new ways of capturing economic impact. I think one of the most significant legacies of this event may well be that we begin the process of creating entirely new rankings metrics and even potentially an entirely new ranking. So we'll look at 50 million citations, 6 million research papers published over a 5-year window. We've surveyed the views of 60,000 senior academics since 2010. It's a really comprehensive ranking. But in terms of the data for the under 50 results, I think I should say that the one change we make from the traditional ranking methodology is we give a dramatically reduced weighting to reputation. So we use the same formula, the same indicators, but the impact of the reputation survey, we reduce it from about 1/3 of the overall score to about 1/5 of the overall score. I'd still like to see that being reduced further. I think the subjective reputation data we have is fascinating, and I'm really pleased with it, but I'd like to focus on more hard objective indicators. That does mean that the ranking results and the overall ranking are a different pecking order to the under 50 ranking because we have changed the methodology. But looking at last year's top 10, what an extraordinary, diverse group of institutions. The thing that excites me most about this is this incredible diversity. The World University Rankings have 2 countries represented in the top 10, the US and the UK. The under 50 ranking has 8 institutions represented. The UK, Switzerland, Hong Kong, Korea, Singapore, US, Netherlands, and France. They're just in the top 10. Incredibly diverse group of institutions. And I can reveal today that on Wednesday, although there's significant change within the top 10, the same 8 countries do make it into the table. So there's a bit of a change in the pecking order, not least because one of the top 10 institutions cruelly became 51 years old, so we've struck them off the list. But we have seen the same institutions. And looking at last year's top 10, you can see there are some common characteristics. There is a strong sense of focused institutions. These ones happen to be primarily focused on science and technology. But I think focus will be a common theme. Institutions in this age bracket don't tend to be quite as comprehensive. They don't attempt to do everything. They're not weighed down by obligations, social obligations, to do absolutely everything, to spread their resources too thinly. They can be more strategically focused, and I think we will hear from Cohen from York about that later today, and be hearing from some other fantastic institutions. And I do think there's a real sense that that's a common characteristic. Of course, money is a big impact. And there is a little bit of cheating. We have to take a definition of a younger institution, and we do say it's about when an institution became a university in its own right, when it got degree awarding powers and the result of a merger. So the French have cheated a little bit. Their 1971 institutions obviously do have much longer origins, and of course EPFL as well has longer origins, but its current form and its current position makes it an under 50 institution. It's a difficult, fluid environment, so I would still welcome consultation on how we actually strictly define age. Just to look at the timeline, I think there is a real challenge that the still age is playing a role. I don't know if you can read that enough. There is a copy of this graphic in the supplement that we distributed, so the 2013 supplement. But you can see there's from the top to the bottom is the ranking position, and it's an age timeline, so from the 60s through to the current day. There's a real cluster of institutions that are nearing 50. Age is still playing a significant factor. And the rankings are very cruel. We're going to see a lot of institutions dropping out purely on the basis of age. It's arbitrary, it's cruel, but I think we want this ranking to be a dynamic, forward-looking ranking. It's not a ranking of record, it's a snapshot in time. It's something more fluid, and I think that's quite right in contrast to the monolithic World University rankings. But I think what this timeline does, it really highlights some exciting institutions, that they're high-ranked and relatively young. There's this cluster. So we see the post-92 institutions of the UK, like Plymouth, doing well with real prospects, but we see this extraordinary mix of institutions in East Asia. POSTECH, founded in 1986. KAIST, founded in 1971. Hong Kong UST and the Nanyang Technological University in Singapore, they were created in 1991 from scratch. Absolute extraordinary progress. Of course, they've been fully and firmly backed with serious cash and political will, and that is an important formula. But they've also had to do a lot to set their own strategy, to carve out their own niches. So just looking at some of the stars, this is last year's number one, POSTECH. You can start to see some of the characteristics. So we break down the ranking scores against the 5 broad categories, and one of the things that immediately stands out for me is industry income. They are absolutely top of the world in terms of the proportion of income they attract from industry. Obviously, POSTECH has a very unique situation in that it's massively funded by POSCO, the steel company. But some of the things that's really started to drive success in rankings in East Asia is that strong commitment to innovation-based, business-backed, impact research universities. And of course, they've got highly focused specialist research with an incredibly high impact. I did have the pleasure of going to Seoul just a few weeks ago, and I had a presentation on POSTECH, and forgive the slide, it's just a photograph I took of the screen, but I like this idea that how can a small and private institution in a rural area, in a non-English speaking country, become world-class in under 30 years? Okay, well, I think we have to accept that being filthy rich is always going to be quite handy. Incredibly generous funding from POSCO, a really firm commitment nationally to creating this innovation-driven institution is important. But there are other aspects. They're extremely selective in their student recruitment. That's not going to be part of the mission of every institution here today. A lot of the institutions will have an access mission. A lot of the institutions will see social mobility as a core part of what they do and part of their unique selling point. But with POSTECH, that has been part of the story. But I think a really important one for me is this institutional autonomy. Freedom from interference, freedom to be dynamic and risk-taking and responsive. And I know with such a diversity in the room, we're seeing very different systems, very different political regimes. That means this isn't always going to be the case. In Europe, you have challenges around autonomy in Brazil. But I think there is something common to most people in this room, and that is that freedom, that flexibility. We're going to hear from Koch University. Their freedom, I think, has been integral to its ability to find funding and to compete much more aggressively with international partners. It's a common theme, and I think freedom is really important. As you forge your identity, you find your distinctiveness. KAIST. I don't need to talk too much about KAIST because we have the absolute honor of having its president, Steve Kang, here today to talk in detail about KAIST's extraordinary success story. So I leave it to him. But again, you see top scores for income from industry, extremely strong research impact. Again, money has been a significant part of that, but it's not the whole story. Hong Kong UST. They've taken one of these enhanced profiles on our website with all the bells and whistles and the videos and images, but the scores remain the same. Strong performance. Hong Kong is ahead on internationalization. I feel personally that international collaboration, international research partnerships, international exchange will be absolutely crucial to success in rankings and success in the wider element. World-class research is inherently global. Attracting international talent will be key to success for many institutions, or leveraging international expertise. Another common story. Hong Kong is actually a real success story. I can reveal as another little snippet that Hong Kong has 3 universities in the top 30 of the ranking that we'll be publishing on Wednesday. I should say, actually, I did promise some exclusive previews. I do need to say that East Asia has strengthened its dominance of our top 10. So the same 8 countries are in the top 10, but we're actually seeing them dominating even more. And I think there's a characteristic that we all need to be conscious of in terms of global geopolitics and the political environments that allows development, that the East Asian nations with a rich and generous funding regime, a very firm government commitment to the knowledge economy and putting universities at the heart of that mission is paying really serious dividends. Nanyang, another absolute star, someone that's really been shooting up the world rankings. 76th in the world this year, up from 86th last year, and it was outside the top 100 in 2012. Something that struck me, incredibly powerful branding. Their visibility has been extraordinary. They're everywhere. They've partnered with us on events, but they're all over the world. You'll see them at meetings. You'll see them visible. Incredibly generous support, again, from government, but this massive commitment to internationalization. Obviously, Singapore has no resource other than its people. So the commitment to drawing in talent, the commitment to making people the key resource nationally has been incredible for the Singaporean universities. But again, incredible industry income, applied, focused research, a research strategy that doesn't try and do everything. Nanyang was an engineering school. It is expanding its research portfolio, but it's still keeping its research in clear, thematic, cross-disciplinary areas. And it's not just East Asia. We are seeing some really nice stories emerging from other parts of the world. Maastricht University has been another rising star of the rankings. It was outside the top 100 a few years ago. It's now in the world top 100. It was 6th in last year's 100 under 50. Again, we're seeing the common themes. Applied research, industry-relevant activity, consultancy at the highest level, research that's focused on the real world and real impact, about the sensible strategic use of resources. Again, we're seeing a global profile, a very good global footprint. It's almost become a joke in the UK that every couple of months the BBC or one of the British newspapers report about how Maastricht is taking all the British students. Now, English students are paying 9,000 fees. We're hearing that Maastricht is hiring them all. They all want an English language experience in Europe. It's partly due to the success of Tony Tyson. He's their PR guy. He's a very effective PR guy. He used to work for Times Higher Education, but it's a great story. They're saying to the British sector, the English sector, come and study with us. And they're also teaching in English, so they're attracting more and more of the international students who would traditionally be going to the UK and onto America. Really dynamic institution with internationalization and impact-based research and impact-based teaching at the heart. But I don't need to dwell too much, because one of the most exciting things about today is that we have real-life case studies. I can show you as much data as I like, but actually we're going to hear today from the people themselves. We're going to hear from the leaders of these institutions, and we're going to get some incredible insights. So I'm really excited about today, so I'm going to stop now and hand over to the next speaker. So thank you so much for your attention, and I'm really looking forward to a very fruitful day.